Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I would like to take a look at the Many Cacturnes of GLC, who's like a spooky scarecrow cactus Pokemon, which I think is a really cool Pokemon, has a great design and everything, but sadly is a bit neglected in the TCG, has never really had a proper chase card or anything. Has been around for ages, by the way. Cacturne has been around for a long time. But yeah, it's never really had a particularly great or noteworthy card that's like been that usable outside of like maybe a budget deck in the Sun and Moon era. So yeah, bit disappointing. So wanted to shed some light on Cacturne. But yeah, what is GLC? For those of you who don't know, well, it's a single prize only no Roblox format. So no like GX Pokemon, EX Pokemon, VMAXs, Megas, that kind of thing. It is singleton except for basic energy, and you're only allowed one type in your deck. So if you were to run a grass type Caxina and a grass type Cacturne, then you can like run them in a fire type deck, for example. Like it's pretty self-explanatory, like only one type per deck. And it only really crops up with one Cacturne that happens to be a dark type, but yeah, we'll talk about that more when we get to it. But yeah, as for some basics, there is actually some quite fun Caxinas. I think Swagger is probably your best bet. Like they all have 60 HP. So, I mean, like, you don't get much choice there with 70 HP. But yeah, I do think the Caxina with Swagger is probably the best one here. Although counterattack Quills is quite nice. If it gets attacked or even gets knocked out, then they just take 30 damage automatically, which I think is quite nice. Poison Payback could be useful, but obviously, like, your opponent will probably switch or evolve before the poison take actually goes all the way up to 30 damage or beyond. So it is probably worth just, chilling with counterattack Quills. However, if you are using Poison Synergy, and there is, of course, a Cacturne that interacts with Poison, then Poison Payback is, a much better ability to have access to. I would say probably the more underwhelming one is the one with Sucker Punch. I mean, just look at them, guy. Look at that swagger, honestly, on this guy. But yeah, Sucker Punch is quite fun. 40 damage if it has any Dark Energy attached to it. So if you happen to be playing a grass deck that interacts with dark energy for whatever reason whatsoever, then yeah, then Sucker Punch is here. It is worth mentioning, of course, there is a Cacturne that also has an attack that does more damage if it has a dark energy. So, something worth bearing in mind if you wanted to use that one. But yeah, the first Cacturne we've got here is sadly not that impressive, although I will say it's got a bit of flavor to it. Like, for instance, this was back in the day when Pokemon actually resisted water types, which is something you really don't see anymore in the game. But yeah, resistance to water, so that's nice. It does have a fairly interesting first attack, actually. Rapid Fire Needles does 60 damage, and then 30 damage to one of your Pokemon, which I thought was worth bringing up because grass types rarely damage themselves, but they also don't really have many like rage attackers. So I'm not really sure what you could pair this up with, but I did think it was worth mentioning in case we ever get like a super powerful or super noteworthy grass type that does more damage for each damage counter on it or something, something like that basically. So there could be some fun synergy in the future, but as it stands in GLC right now, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head where this could be useful, but something worth bearing in mind. And then Payback is kind of interesting. It does 90 damage if your opponent has one prize card left, I should say. And then you also get to discard energy from the defending Pokemon. So could be useful in a pinch, but it is more here for that rapid fire needles, and hopefully we get some cool synergy for this guy in the future. Next up is we have the only dark type Cacturne in the video, thank goodness. But yeah, there is no dark type Caxini, which means you can't actually play Cacturne, this one, in a grass deck. You would have to play it exclusively just on its own in dark type deck. How you get into play? Well, there's Grimsley's move at the very least, so that's something. The next question is, though, do you want to bother getting it into play? Because these stats are pretty poor. Like, the HP is nothing interesting. The ability to remove a special energy is fine, but, like, you just wouldn't bother with this. Like, you just play an Enhanced Hammer, which is way easier to find and way more splashable. And then, like, Pin Missiles, just, like, it's coin flips. So it's just, yeah, it's a bit unreliable and can only cap at 120. So, yeah, really not that impressive. It would be funny, for your opponent to do all this massive hype play, get a Grimsley's move out, and then they just bench this, and it's like, oh, that's a bit underwhelming. Like it's not very good, sadly. Which is yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but yeah, it's not very good. Next up is we've got a one from Crimson Invasion, I believe that is, and this one's a bit more interesting. We've got Spike Rend and Hunt. Spike Rend does 30 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it, this attack does 60 more. So you can do 90 for one grass, which is certainly a bit more respectable. Like, still not great damage. Like, you're not going to remove a lot of stage 1s in GLC, but you will remove the majority of evolving basics, which is cool. You could use things like Hisuian Litigant to soften up Pokemon. There's the Celebi, of course, which spreads damage counters everywhere. So, some fun options there. And then Hunt says switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active, and you do 40 damage to the new active Pokemon. So it is effectively a gust move, but it's not really a stolen switch move. Like, unless your opponent had a ton of Pokemon in play, they're all really tanky and really beefy with a high retreat cost, then maybe you could use Hunt to like store trap them. But really, what this is here for is just finishing something off. So if you run out of boss or something, you could just hunt something down, basically. But at that point, why are you not just playing Guzma, Pokemon Counter Catcher, like boss's orders and stuff? Like, there's just better options, really. It is still a fun card, though. I like the artwork. I think both these attacks are interesting, so props to them for doing that. But at the same time, it's not like the best card in the world, sadly. It could be better, basically. Next up is we have a one from Celestial Storm. Quite interesting, this one. It basically just says if it's damaged by an attack or KO'd, your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, which does have some nice synergy with some grass types that interact with special conditions, aka there's a Moongus over here, which can do 150. I've also got Feint Attack. For 3 colorless energy, does 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon and isn't affected by weakness resistance or any other effects. Which, yeah, kind of sucks because it means you're not never hitting weakness on the active, which, if anything's ever weak to grass, then you're not hitting for 100, but you can do 50 snipe wherever you want it. For 3 colorless, it is a bit more on the expensive side, though, so it is mainly here for that ability, right? Like, if you run triple acceleration energy, cool. Like, I could imagine you can maybe hide behind one of these and then, like, use a charm to build up a feint attack. And then, like, if your opponent chooses not to KO Cacturne and just sit there, then you can, of course, just, start using feint attack to do some sniping. And then, of course, when they KO poison payback, they take the poison. So that's kind of cool at the very least. Like, thematically, it's quite a fun card, but I think there's probably just way better options like Maractus, who can retreat lock and stuff. So, yeah, a bit of a shame for this Cacturne because, again, I do think it's interesting. And then we have a one from Battle Styles. This is the one that interacted with the Sucker Punch Caxina. So it has Pull, which is a pretty useful attack. Like, it's a gust up effect, so like a bit of retreat lock, potentially. And then Spiny Punch for a grass and a colorless, but it's probably going to be a grass and a dark energy. Does 60 damage, and if it has any dark energy attached to it, it does 70 more, so 130 damage. Which is not brilliant, admittedly, for 2 energy, and especially when you're fulfilling this effect. You would ideally like this to be like plus 100 damage or, plus 80 damage at the very least or something. But, 130, it's not the worst. Pull is kind of useful. I think the one we just looked at is slightly more useful. But, yeah, Pull and Spiny Punch, not the worst attacks in the world, but you could probably do better. It's a shame, though, because the artwork is lovely. I mean, it's just frolicking on the beach, it looks very nice. But, yeah, next up, though, is we have one from Scarlet Violet. This is the last one that was printed before it rotated out, so not really done much in Standard. But yeah, very fun artwork once again. And this one has that ability counterattack quills again. So if it's damaged or knocked out, your opponent takes 30 damage. Sadly, it's not like buffed up from the basic. So both Caxina and Cacturne are offering you 3 damage counters, which is a bit of a shame. Like, you would hope this would be buffed up to 4 or even like 5 or 6 damage counters, but nope, they decided not to for some reason. And then Spike Shot for 3 colorless does 110. So like for triple acceleration energy or Reversal you could use, or like the Charm, like Meganium could outpay for this. Stuff like that is fine. So this is very much a leave this in the active spot and let your opponent smack into it for some recall damage, basically. And you can use like Bursting Balloon, you could use Vengeful Punch and stuff like that. So there is some fun ways of doing some shenanigans here. But sadly, it's a very fragile Pokemon, so you will have to play like Cricketune and the new Special Grass Energy from Perfect Order if you want to get like the most out of these abilities, basically. But if you want to build around damage counters, I would recommend looking into Chestnut, because Chestnut has a lot of cards, especially coming out in Chaos Rising, actually, whereby if it's damaged, your opponent takes damage counters. So if that recall damage whole aspect of deck building is really appealing to you, then Chestnut from Chaos Rising would be right up your street. So just something worth bearing in mind, I thought. But yeah, thanks for watching. I do a new set review for GLC with each new release, so subscribe if you're interested in being updated. The last set review we did was Perfect Order. The next one will be Chaos Rising, probably closer to the release date in May or maybe even late April. This is a series to stay, of course, so let me know which Pokemon you would like to see. I believe this is like the 51st video in this series, so yeah, quite a few. There is a list, but getting through them, and a playlist has been made. I think Mewtwo was up next. But if you want to dive into the competitive side, Omnipoke and the format creator Trigger Gym have both done fantastic videos and guides for each type. But all that being said and done, this has been Ember Power. Let me know what you think about Cacturne down below. Do you wish I had better cards? And yeah, thank you for watching.